The gunshot echoed through the valley like the cry of a wounded animal, and Eleanor Collins flinched as the last of the dirt hit her husband's coffin. At 28, she had become a widow in the harshest land, known to man the Arizona Territory of 1875 with nothing but a failing ranch and memories that cut deeper than the desert wind. Eleanor clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders, her knuckles white with tension as Reverend Simmons finished his sermon. The small gathering of townspeople from Cottonwood Springs offered condolences that felt as hollow as her future. 5 years of marriage to Thomas Collins had ended with a stray bullet during a bank robbery she hadn't even witnessed. "Mrs. Collins," Sheriff Patterson approached, hat in hand, "I'm mighty sorry for your loss. Thomas was a good man." She nodded stiffly, unable to form words through the tightness in her throat. What good were words now? Thomas was gone, and with him every dream they'd built together. "If there's anything you need." The sheriff trailed off. Eleanor finally looked up, her green eyes rimmed with red. "Have you caught them yet? The men who did this?" The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Not yet, madam, but I've sent telegrams to every town within 100 miles. We'll find them." "And what good will that do me?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. As the mourners dispersed, Eleanor remained, staring at the fresh mound of earth. The wind picked up, sending dust swirling around her skirts, and she opened her hands to find them empty, just like her heart, just like her future. "Mrs. Collins," a deep voice called from behind her. Eleanor turned to see a tall figure on horseback, silhouetted against the setting sun. He dismounted with the fluid grace of a man who had spent his life in the saddle. As he approached, she recognized Zachary Thornton, owner of the neighboring Triple T Ranch. "Mr. Thornton," she acknowledged with a small nod. They had never spoken more than passing pleasantries at church or town gatherings. "I wanted to pay my respects," he said, removing his hat to reveal thick brown hair. His face was tanned and weathered by the sun, with a strong jaw softened by kind eyes. "Thomas was a fair neighbor." "Thank you," she replied automatically, "though I'm afraid I must be getting back. There's much to do." Zachary nodded, his eyes troubled as he glanced at her empty ranch wagon. "Your hand, Rodriguez, mentioned you let him go yesterday." Eleanor stiffened. "I can't afford to keep him on, not anymore." "The Flying Sea is a good piece of land, Mrs. Collins, too much for a woman alone." "I'm not alone," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "I have God." A small smile touched Zachary's lips. "Even the good Lord expects us to accept help when offered, Mrs. Collins." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and returned to his horse, swinging into the saddle with practiced ease. Eleanor watched him ride away, annoyed by his presumption and yet strangely comforted that someone had noticed her plight. The ride back to the Flying Sea was long and lonely. Eleanor had insisted on driving the wagon herself, refusing offers of assistance. Now, as the wheels creaked over the rutted dirt road, she questioned her pride. The ranch house appeared on the horizon, looking smaller and more desolate than she remembered. Thomas had built it with his own hands when they'd married, promising her a life of prosperity and love. Now all that remained were debts and memories. She unhitched the horse and led it to the stable, her movements mechanical. Inside the house, she lit a lamp and stared at the empty rooms. The silence pressed in on her from all sides, broken only by the ticking of the mantel clock, a wedding gift from her parents back east. Eleanor sank into Thomas's chair and finally allowed herself to weep, her sobs echoing through the empty house. She cried until her throat burned and her eyes stung, until her hands clutched at nothing but air. Morning brought no relief. Eleanor rose before dawn, as she always had, but found herself standing in the kitchen, uncertain of what to do next. Without Thomas or the ranch hand, the endless list of chores seemed insurmountable. Still, she was not one to wallow. Her mother had raised her to face adversity with grace and determination. By mid-morning, she had fed the chickens, milked the cow, and attempted to repair a broken fence post. The latter proved beyond her strength, and she sat in the dust, hammer in hand, fighting back tears of frustration. "You'll want to set that post deeper before nailing it," came a familiar voice. Eleanor scrambled to her feet, mortified to be found in such a state. Zachary Thornton sat on his horse, watching her with an unreadable expression. "Mr. Thornton, this is becoming a habit," she said, brushing dirt from her skirts. "Just passing by," he replied, though they both knew the Triple T Ranch lay in the opposite direction from town. He dismounted and approached the fence. "May I?" Too tired to argue, Eleanor handed him the hammer. With efficient movements, he reset the post and secured it, his strong hands making quick work of a task that had defeated her. "Thank you," she said stiffly when he finished. "Mrs. Collins," Zachary began, then hesitated. "Eleanor, if I may, I have a proposition for you," her back stiffened. "Mr. Thornton, hear me out," he said quickly. "I need help at the Triple T. My housekeeper, Mrs. Feeney, is getting on in years and could use assistance with the cooking and mending. You're offering me a job as your servant?" Her voice rose with indignation. Zachary's expression remained calm. "I'm offering you a way to earn money while you decide what to do with the flying C. The position includes room and board and fair wages." Eleanor opened her mouth to refuse, but practicality stopped her. The meager funds Thomas had left wouldn't last the month. The mortgage payment was due in 3 weeks, and the bank had made it clear they had little sympathy for widows. "I need time to consider," she said finally. Zachary nodded. "Of course, the offer remains open." He mounted his horse and tipped his hat. "Good day, Mrs. Collins." Eleanor watched him ride away, conflicted emotions churning inside her. Pride demanded she refuse, survival urged acceptance. She looked back at the house, at the failing fence, at the fields that needed tending. Thomas would want her to survive, she knew that much. 3 days later, Eleanor stood on the porch of the Triple T Ranch, a small carpetbag in hand. Mrs. Feeney, a plump woman with iron-gray hair, welcomed her warmly. "It'll be a blessing having another pair of hands around here," she said, leading Eleanor inside. "The master's a good man, but this place needs a woman's touch." The ranch house was larger than Eleanor expected, built of sturdy logs with a stone fireplace dominating the main room. It was clean but sparse, lacking the small touches that made a house a home. "Mr. Thornton will be back by supper," Mrs. Feeney explained, showing Eleanor to a small but comfortable bedroom. "He's out with the hands, moving cattle to the north pasture." Eleanor unpacked her few belongings, carefully placing Thomas's photograph on the bedside table. "I haven't forgotten you," she whispered to the image of her smiling husband. Life at the Triple T fell into a rhythm. Eleanor helped Mrs. Feeney with the cooking and cleaning, mended clothes for the ranch hands, and slowly found herself sleeping through the night without waking in tears. Zachary treated her with unfailing courtesy, careful to maintain a proper distance. Yet she noticed things about him, the way he always thanked the ranch hands at the end of the day, how he rode by lamplight in the evenings, the gentleness with which he treated his horses. He was nothing like Thomas, who had been quick to laugh and quick to anger. Zachary was steady, thoughtful, and she found herself watching him when he wasn't looking. One evening, as she was serving dinner, their hands brushed. A jolt of awareness shot through her, and she nearly dropped the platter of roast beef. Zachary steadied her with a hand on her elbow, his touch burning through the fabric of her sleeve. "Careful," he murmured, and the concern in his eyes made her heart skip. Eleanor pulled away, confused by her reaction. "Excuse me," she said, retreating to the kitchen. She pressed her hands against her hot cheeks, ashamed of her body's betrayal. Thomas was barely 2 months in his grave. The next morning, a letter arrived from the bank. Eleanor recognized the handwriting of Mr. Perkins, the bank manager. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal. "Dear Mrs. Collins, it is with regret that I must inform you of the bank's decision to foreclose on the Flying C Ranch due to non-payment of the mortgage. You have until the end of the month to vacate the property. Sincerely, Howard Perkins." The paper fluttered from her fingers. The end of the month was just 10 days away. She had hoped to save enough from her wages to make at least a partial payment, but it wasn't nearly enough. Bad news. Zachary asked from the doorway. Eleanor hastily wiped her eyes. Nothing unexpected. He crossed the room and picked up the letter, scanning it quickly. His jaw tightened. Perkins didn't waste any time, did he? It's business, Eleanor said, her voice hollow. The Flying C was never profitable. Thomas kept it going through sheer will and occasional loans. And now it will likely go to the highest bidder, Zachary said grimly. Probably the Rasmussen outfit. They've been trying to expand eastward. The thought of the Rasmussens, known for their cutthroat business practices and poor treatment of the land owning the ranch Thomas had loved, made Eleanor's stomach clench. What will you do? Zachary asked quietly. She squared her shoulders. I still have my position here if you'll keep me on. Perhaps I can save enough to start again somewhere else. Zachary seemed about to speak, then changed his mind. Your position is secure, Mrs. Collins, for as long as you wish it. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She slipped outside to the porch, wrapped in her shawl against the cool night air. The stars blazed overhead, indifferent to human suffering. Couldn't sleep either. Zachary's voice startled her. He stood in the shadows, a cup of coffee in his hand. In the moonlight, his features were softened, making him look younger than his 34 years. Too many thoughts, she admitted. He offered her his coffee and she took a sip, the warmth spreading through her chest. I could buy the Flying C, he said suddenly. Eleanor nearly choked. What? I have the means, he continued, his voice matter of fact. The Triple T is doing well. I've been wanting to expand. Mr. Thornton, Zachary, please, after all this time. Zachary, she corrected, the name feeling strange on her tongue. I couldn't accept such charity. It's not charity. It's business. He turned to face her fully. But I would have conditions. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, such as, you would continue to live there as my wife. The words hung in the night air between them. Eleanor stared at him, certain she had misheard. Your wife, she finally managed. Zachary ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of nervousness. I know it's sudden, and I know you're still mourning Thomas, but I've come to admire you, Eleanor, your strength, your determination. Admiration is not love, she said softly. No, he agreed, but it's a foundation. Love can grow from respect and partnership. He took a step closer. I'm not asking you to love me now, just to consider the possibility of a future where you might. Eleanor's mind whirled. Marriage to Zachary would secure her future, save Thomas's land, give her a chance at a life she had thought lost forever. But could she truly open her heart again? I need time, she said. Zachary nodded. Of course, take all the time you need. But time was the one thing she didn't have. As the days passed and the foreclosure date loomed, Eleanor found herself watching Zachary more closely. She noticed the quiet authority he commanded among his men, the fairness with which he treated everyone. She saw his hands strong and capable and wondered how they would feel against her skin. The thought made her blush. A week after his proposal, Eleanor rode with Zachary to the Flying C. She had asked to visit, to say goodbye to the place that had been her home. The house stood silent and empty, dust already gathering on the windowsills. Thomas loved this land, she said as they walked toward the creek that marked the eastern boundary. He had such dreams for it. Dreams don't have to die with the dreamer, Zachary said quietly. Eleanor stopped, turning to face him. The afternoon sun gilded his features, highlighting the kindness in his eyes. Why me? She asked suddenly. You could have any unmarried woman in the territory. Why propose to a widow with nothing to her name? Zachary's gaze never wavered. Because when I look at you, I see a woman of rare courage. Because you have known sorrow and haven't let it break you. Because... He hesitated, then continued, his voice lower. Because when you smile, which is far too rarely, it lights something inside me I thought long dead. Eleanor's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not even Thomas in his most affectionate moments. I don't know if I can be the wife you deserve, she admitted. My heart is still so broken. Then let me help you mend it, he said simply, holding out his hand. After a long moment, Eleanor placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and secure. Yes, she whispered. I will marry you. They were wed 3 days later in the small church in Cottonwood Springs. Eleanor wore her best dress, a deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes. Mrs. Feeney had woven wildflowers into her dark hair, and for the first time since Thomas's death, she felt a glimmer of hope. The ceremony was brief, the words familiar yet strange in this new context. When Reverend Simmons pronounced them man and wife, Zachary's kiss was gentle, almost tentative, a promise rather than a passion. Mrs. Thornton, he murmured against her lips, and Eleanor felt a tremor run through her body. That night, as Eleanor prepared for bed in what was now their bedroom at the Triple T, her hands shook. She had known only one man in her life, and the prospect of intimacy with another filled her with both anticipation and dread. Zachary entered quietly, closing the door behind him. He had changed into a clean shirt, his hair still damp from washing. Eleanor, he began, his voice gentle, I want you to know that I expect nothing from you tonight or any night until you're ready. Relief and an unexpected disappointment warred within her. Thank you, she said softly. He crossed to her and took her hands in his. I meant what I said about building a foundation first. We have time. Eleanor looked up at him, this man who had saved her from destitution, who had offered her a new life without demanding her heart in return. Impulsively, she rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. Zachary remained still for a heartbeat, then his arms came around her, drawing her closer. The kiss deepened, and Eleanor felt something kindle inside her, not the familiar love she had felt for Thomas, but something new, something with the potential to grow into something even stronger. When they parted, both were breathing harder. Zachary rested his forehead against hers. I'll be a good husband to you, Eleanor, I promise. I believe you, she whispered, and found that she did. The next morning they rode together to the bank in Cottonwood Springs. Mr. Perkins's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline when Zachary presented him with the full amount owed on the Flying C. Mr. Thornton, this is most irregular, the banker protested weakly. My wife and I intend to keep both ranches running, Zachary said firmly. The deed will remain in her name. Eleanor glanced at him in surprise. They hadn't discussed this. The Flying C was her husband's legacy, Zachary continued. I have no intention of taking that from her. Outside the bank, Eleanor confronted him. You didn't tell me you planned to leave the ranch in my name. Zachary helped her onto her horse. I want you to have something that's yours alone, something no one can take from you. But we're married now. What's mine is yours. Some things should remain separate, he said, mounting his own horse. Your independence is one of them. As summer turned to fall, Eleanor and Zachary fell into a rhythm of partnership. They worked side by side, rebuilding the Flying C while maintaining the Triple T. Zachary hired new hands for both ranches, and Eleanor found herself taking an active role in the management of the properties. At night, their physical relationship grew gradually more intimate, each step taken with care and consideration. Eleanor discovered that Zachary was a patient lover, attentive to her needs in a way that made her feel both cherished and desired. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Eleanor realized with a start that she was happy. The pain of losing Thomas would always be a part of her, but it no longer dominated her every waking moment. What are you thinking? Zachary asked, his hand warm on hers. I was thinking about how life surprises us, she said honestly. 6 months ago, I couldn't imagine feeling anything but grief, and now, he prompted gently. Eleanor turned to look at him, this man who had become her husband, her partner, her friend. And now I find myself falling in love with you. The words seemed to hang in the air between them. Zachary's eyes widened, and for a moment he looked almost vulnerable. Eleanor, he said, his voice rough with emotion, I have loved you since the day I found you trying to fix that fence post all alone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Inside was a ring, a simple gold band set with a small diamond that caught the last rays of the setting sun. "But we're already married," Eleanor said in confusion. "We married in haste with no time for proper courtship or rings," Zachary explained. "I wanted you to have something that symbolizes not just our marriage of convenience, but the love that has grown between us." Tears filled Eleanor's eyes as Zachary took her left hand and slipped the ring onto her finger, next to the plain band they had exchanged at their wedding. "Eleanor Thornton," he said solemnly, "I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life." "I love you, Zachary," she whispered, the words no longer frightening but freeing. Their kiss was different from any they had shared before, not tentative or exploratory, but confident and passionate, a sealing of their newly acknowledged love. That night, as they lay entwined in their bed, Eleanor traced the contours of Zachary's face with her fingertips. "I never thought I would feel this way again," she admitted. "After Thomas died, I thought that part of me was buried with him." Zachary caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Love isn't a finite resource, Eleanor. Your love for Thomas doesn't diminish what you feel for me, and I would never ask you to forget him. You are a remarkable man, Zachary Thornton. I'm a fortunate man," he corrected, "to have found you." Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranges in snow. The combined resources of the Triple T and Flying C ensured that their cattle survived the harsh conditions better than many neighboring ranches. By spring, their operation was thriving, and Eleanor had firmly established herself as Zachary's equal in the eyes of their hands and the townspeople. On a warm day in April, Eleanor rode out to the far pasture where Zachary was checking on the new calves. She found him kneeling beside a cow in labor, his sleeves rolled up, his strong hands gentle as he helped deliver the calf. Eleanor dismounted and held the reins of both their horses, watching with admiration as Zachary worked. When the calf finally emerged, wet and trembling, Zachary stood with a grin of satisfaction. "A fine, healthy bull calf," he announced. "That makes 23 new arrivals this week." Eleanor smiled, but her expression must have betrayed something, for Zachary's brow furrowed in concern. "Is something wrong?" he asked, approaching her. "Not wrong," she said, taking a deep breath, "but I have news that will change our plans somewhat." "Oh." He reached for the handkerchief in his pocket and wiped his hands clean. "We'll be having an arrival of our own come November," Eleanor said, her hand moving instinctively to her still flat stomach. Zachary stared at her, incomprehension giving way to dawning understanding. "A baby." "We're having a baby." At her nod, he let out a whoop of joy that startled the horses. In an instant, he had swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed and protested. "Careful, I've been feeling a bit queasy in the mornings." He set her down immediately, his expression contrite. "I'm sorry, are you all right? Should you be riding? Maybe you should sit down." Eleanor laughed at his sudden protectiveness. "I'm fine, Zachary. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, often while working far harder than I do." But he insisted on helping her back onto her horse and rode close beside her all the way back to the ranch house, as if afraid she might fall at any moment. That evening, as they sat before the fire, Zachary's hand rested on her abdomen, his expression one of wonder. "A child," he murmured. "Our child." Eleanor covered his hand with hers. "Are you pleased?" "Pleased doesn't begin to describe it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Eleanor, when I first saw you at Thomas's funeral, you looked so lost, so alone. Your hands were empty, and I remember thinking how wrong that seemed for a woman with so much love to give." He lifted her hand and kissed the ring he had given her. "I wanted to fill those hands with something worthy of you, with love, with a future. Now life has filled your body with our child, and I can't imagine a greater blessing." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks. "How is it possible to be this happy after such sorrow?" "Because you were brave enough to open your heart again," Zachary said, gathering her close. "Brave enough to take a chance on a future you couldn't see." As the months passed, and Eleanor's body changed with the growing life inside her, she often thought about the twists of fate that had brought her to this point. Thomas's death had seemed like the end of everything, yet it had been, in its way, a beginning on a clear, cold night in November. With the first snow of winter falling softly outside, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter. The labor was long and difficult, but Zachary never left her side, his strength sustaining her through the worst of the pain. "She's beautiful," he whispered, cradling the tiny bundle with awe, just like her mother. They named her Hope, for what she represented to both of them the promise of new beginnings, of life continuing even after devastating loss. As Eleanor nursed her daughter in the quiet of their bedroom, she gazed down at the small, perfect face and then up at Zachary, who watched them with undisguised adoration. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked softly. "If you hadn't stopped by that day to help with the fence post." Zachary sat beside her on the bed, his arm supporting her back. "I like to think we would have found our way to each other somehow. Some things are meant to be, Eleanor." She leaned against him, their daughter nestled between them. "A year ago, I stood at a grave with empty hands and an emptier heart. Now look at what fills them: a husband who loves me, a child who needs me, a future I never dared imagine." Zachary pressed a kiss to her temple. "And there's more to come. More years, more children if you want them, more love than either of us ever thought possible." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the land in a blanket of pristine white. Inside, in the warmth of their home, Eleanor Collins Thornton held her future in her arms and knew that even the deepest wounds could heal, even the emptiest hands could be filled again with unexpected blessings. "I love you, Zachary Thornton," she whispered. "And I love you, Eleanor Thornton," he replied, "until the end of my days and beyond." Hope stirred between them, her tiny hand curling around her mother's finger with surprising strength. Eleanor smiled, feeling the warmth of her wedding ring against her daughter's skin, a circle unbroken, a promise fulfilled, a love that had transformed grief into joy.